finest Scotch, neat. Christopher Mason's demand echoed in the hushed elegance of the upscale restaurant. Marcus D. Daniels, a black man with dreams deferred, was just another face in the crowd he served. But tonight, patience wears thin, and a small act ignites a much larger battle. The soft chime of bells drifted through the air at the exclusive Santa Monica rooftop restaurant. It was a subtle signal, a gentle nudge to remind patrons that they were in a place of privilege, a world away from the clamour of the city below. Christopher Mason, a man who epitomized LA's social elite, stepped into this rarefied atmosphere. His tailored suit, a masterpiece of Italian design, clung to his frame with effortless elegance. His shoes, hand-polished and gleaming, clicked against the marble floor, each step a declaration of his status. Heads turned, as they always did, to acknowledge his presence. Christopher, accustomed to such attention, moved with an air of nonchalant confidence, a practiced ease that bordered on arrogance. He was a master of entrances, a man who turned every arrival into a performance. The restaurant, perched atop a high-rise building, was a testament to the city's obsession with views. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the coastline stretched out like a glittering ribbon, the ocean sparkling under the moonlight. The decor was minimalist, a subtle blend of muted colours and sleek lines, allowing the panorama outside to take centre stage. This was a place where the air hummed with wealth and power, where conversations were conducted in hushed tones, and where every detail, from the imported candles to the hand-stitched napkins, exuded exclusivity. Christopher breathed in the rarefied air, a faint smirk playing on his lips. This was his world, a world where waiters catered to his every whim, where staff knew their place, and where patrons expected nothing less than perfection. He moved towards his usual table, a prime spot by the window that offered an unobstructed view of the ocean. As he walked, he noticed Marcus D. Daniels, a young black man, moving gracefully between the tables. Marcus carried a tray laden with glasses, his movements fluid and precise. He wore the restaurant's standard black uniform, but there was a quiet dignity in his posture, a resilience that spoke of a life lived with purpose. Marcus had grown up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a family where hard work was not just a virtue, but a necessity. He had put himself through college with a combination of scholarships and part-time jobs, juggling classes with late-night shifts and early morning study sessions. He had moved to LA with dreams of breaking into the entertainment industry, but the city had been less than welcoming. The glitz and glamour had quickly given way to the harsh reality of competition and the struggle to make ends meet. The job at the restaurant, initially intended as a temporary stepping stone, had become a fixture in his life. As Christopher settled into his table, he barely glanced at the menu. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he summoned Marcus. "I'll have a glass of your finest Scotch," he ordered, his tone laced with entitlement, "and make sure it's served neat. Absolutely no ice." Marcus, accustomed to odd requests and demanding patrons, simply nodded. "Certainly, sir. I'll bring that right away." He turned to walk away, but Christopher stopped him. "And make it quick," he added, his voice sharp. "I haven't got all night." Marcus paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Of course, sir," he replied, maintaining his professional demeanour. As Marcus walked towards the bar, he could feel Christopher's gaze on his back. He knew that Christopher was watching him, judging him, reducing him to the role he was playing at that moment, a waiter, a servant. It was a familiar feeling, one that Marcus had learned to navigate, but it never failed to sting. He thought of his mother, her words echoing in his mind, "Dignity, Marcus. Never let anyone take that from you." He reached the bar and poured the scotch, his hands steady despite the turmoil inside him. He thought of his dreams, the reason he had come to LA in the first place. He had talent, he had ambition, but the city was a tough place to crack. He had auditioned for roles, sent out headshots, attended countless networking events, but the breaks had been few and far between. The job at the restaurant was a means to an end, a way to pay the bills while he pursued his passion. But sometimes it felt like he was treading water, barely keeping his head above the surface. He placed the glass on a tray and took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. He had to deal with people like Christopher all the time, people who looked down on him, who treated him like he was invisible. It was part of the job, he told himself. But tonight, something felt different. Christopher's words had been particularly cutting, his tone dripping with disdain. It wasn't just about the drink, it was about something more, something that went beyond the surface. It was about power, about privilege, about the way some people believed they were entitled to treat others. He returned to Christopher's table and placed the glass in front of him. "Here you are, sir," he said, his voice even. Christopher picked up the glass and swirled the scotch, his eyes narrowed. "You know," he said, his voice low, "it's really quite simple. All it takes is a little attention to detail, a little effort, but some people just don't seem to have the capacity for that." Marcus clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. He wanted to tell Christopher that he knew all about attention to detail, that he had spent hours perfecting his craft, that he had worked harder than anyone Christopher had ever met. But he knew it was pointless. People like Christopher didn't care about hard work or talent or dreams. They only cared about themselves. Just then, a voice interrupted them. "Excuse me," it said. Christopher turned to see Douglas Winters, the renowned attorney, sitting at the next table. He recognized him instantly. Winters was a legend in LA, a man known for his wealth, his power, and his philanthropy. He was also known for his integrity, his sense of justice, and his willingness to stand up for what he believed in. "Mr. Winters," Christopher stammered, his arrogance melting away. Winters looked at him, his eyes steady. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," he said. "I must say, I was rather disappointed." Christopher's face flushed. He knew what was coming. "This young man," Winters continued, gesturing towards Marcus, "is working hard to serve you. He deserves your respect, not your condescension." Christopher opened his mouth to protest, but Winters cut him off. "It's not about the drink," he said. "It's about how you treat people. It's about basic human decency." He turned to Marcus. "I apologize for this man's behavior," he said. "You don't deserve to be treated this way." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. He couldn't believe that Douglas Winters, a man he had admired from afar, was standing up for him. "Thank you, Mr. Winters," he managed to say. Winters smiled. "You're welcome," he said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dinner to enjoy." He turned back to his own table, leaving Christopher speechless. Marcus stood there for a moment, taking it all in. He felt a surge of gratitude towards Winters, a renewed sense of hope. He realized that there were still good people in the world, people who cared about others, people who were willing to stand up for what was right. He looked at Christopher, who was now staring down at his plate, his face red with shame. He felt a pang of pity for him. He realized that Christopher was not a bad person, just someone who had lost his way. He had let his wealth and status go to his head, and he had forgotten what it meant to be human. He turned and walked away, leaving Christopher alone with his thoughts. He knew that he would never forget this moment, that he would never again treat someone with disrespect. He had learned a valuable lesson, a lesson that no amount of money could buy. As he walked back to the kitchen, he thought about his dreams. He knew that they were still a long way off, but he also knew that he was not going to give up. He had faced adversity before, and he would face it again. He was a survivor, a fighter, and he was not going to let anyone, not even Christopher Mason, take away his dignity. He reached the kitchen and took a deep breath. He was ready to face whatever came next. He was ready to pursue his dreams. He was ready to make his mark on the world. And he knew that he would do it with dignity, with respect, and with kindness.